On September 8, 2024, at 4:22 a.m. Coordinated Universal Time, NASA astronaut Garrett Chen was not supposed to be looking out the cupola module window. He was supposed to be sleeping. But sleep comes hard at 17,500 miles per hour, 254 miles above a planet, spinning below you every 90 minutes. And Garrett had learned during his previous two missions that the quiet hours before crew wake-up were the only time the International Space Station felt truly his. He was recording a message for his son, 12-year-old Mason, who had autism and communicated better through video than words, and who loved nothing more than his father's descriptions of what Earth looked like from space. Garrett was 41 years old, former Air Force test pilot, third orbital mission. He had logged 893 days off-planet across 6 years. He knew what belonged up here and what didn't. The GoPro Hero, 12 strapped to the window frame, captured everything in 4K clarity as Garrett narrated the sunrise coming over the Indian Ocean, the way the atmosphere ignited in layers of orange and violet, the delicate curve of the planet that made you understand, viscerally, how thin the membrane of breathable air really was. He was explaining to Mason how the solar arrays rotated to track the sun when he saw it. At first, his brain categorized it as debris. The ISS tracks over 27,000 objects larger than 10 centimeters. Collisions happen, but debris tumbles. Debris has momentum from whatever launched it or broke it. Debris does not hold perfect position 180 meters from your starboard side, matching orbital velocity to within 0.03 meters per second, with no visible thrusters, no exhaust plume, no heat signature. Garrett stopped talking. The GoPro kept recording. The object was approximately 40 meters long, irregular geometry that seemed to fold in on itself in ways that made his eyes hurt to track. Not metallic, not matte, something that absorbed light at certain angles and bent it at others, creating distortion fields around its edges like heat shimmer. Except there was no heat. He checked the external temperature sensors. Negative 170 degrees Fahrenheit in shadow. The object showed no thermal variance from surrounding space. It was pulsing, regular intervals, 1.3 seconds between each pulse. Not visible light. Garrett only saw it because the GoPro's sensor picked up wavelengths human eyes couldn't. Infrared. The footage showed soft blue-white flashes emanating from 3 points on the object's surface, synchronized perfectly, like a heartbeat. Garrett had been trained for this. Every astronaut has. Unidentified object protocol. Notify Capcom immediately. Document everything. Maintain professional demeanor. Do not speculate. He reached for the comm panel, keeping the GoPro pointed at the object, and keyed the channel to Houston. His voice was steady, technical, exactly as it should be. Houston, ISS. We have visual on unidentified object. Starboard side, approximate range 180 meters. Object is station-keeping with no visible propulsion. Requesting telemetry analysis. The response should have been immediate. Communications travel at the speed of light. 254 miles means a delay of 0.0013 seconds. Effectively instantaneous. But Capcom took 2.3 seconds to respond. In space operations, where every protocol is timed to the millisecond, where controllers train to react faster than thought, 2.3 seconds is an eternity. When the voice came back, it was Sharon Way, veteran Capcom, 15 years at mission control. Garrett had worked with her on Expedition 68. She never hesitated. Never. But now her voice carried something Garrett had never heard from her before. A careful flatness, words chosen with precision. "Copy that, ISS. We're checking telemetry. Stand by." Garrett kept filming. The object maintained position. Perfect orbital mechanics with no apparent means of achieving them. To match the ISS's velocity required constant microthruster adjustments to compensate for atmospheric drag, gravitational variations, solar pressure. The station burned through 4 tons of propellant per year just staying in orbit. This object showed no propellant, no reaction mass, no Newton's third law equal and opposite anything. 4 minutes and 47 seconds of footage. Garrett narrated technical details in a calm voice, while his heart rate climbed to 112 beats per minute, recorded automatically by his biomonitor, and transmitted to Houston in real time. The object pulsed its infrared heartbeat. 1.3 seconds. Again, again, again. Then Sharon's voice returned. "ISS, Houston. Copy your report. Flight Director requests you secure all personal recording devices and report to Columbus Module for private channel briefing. Acknowledge." Garrett looked at the GoPro, at the impossible thing in his viewfinder, at the footage that would change everything or be classified into silence. He thought about Mason, waiting for his father's videos from space, waiting to see wonders. He reached over and stopped the recording. "Houston, ISS, acknowledged." 18 minutes later, as Garrett floated through the Harmony module toward Columbus, he ran the numbers in his head the way test pilots do, the way people who trust machines with their lives learn to think in backup systems and redundancies. The object had been exactly 180 meters away, close enough to see detail. Far enough that if it had hostile intent, the station would have approximately 11 seconds of warning before impact at typical debris collision speeds. Except it hadn't been moving like debris. It had been moving like something that understood orbital mechanics better than the engineers who built the ISS. Something that could park itself in space with the precision of a surgical instrument and simply wait. The call came through on his personal comm unit, the one reserved for family contacts and private communications, which meant Flight Director Madison Torres was bypassing official channels. Madison was 43 years old, 12 years at Johnson Space Center, known throughout NASA for following protocols with religious precision. She had managed Expedition 70 during the Soyuz coolant leak, kept 6 people alive through 48 hours of cascading system failures by never deviating from checklist procedure. If Madison was calling on personal channels, something was already wrong in ways the official communications net couldn't acknowledge. "Garrett, this is Madison Direct. I need you to power down all personal recording devices immediately and report to Columbus Module for private briefing via secure channel." "This is not a request." Her voice carried the flat affect of someone reading from a script, but underneath it, Garrett heard something else. Tension. The vocal equivalent of white knuckles on a control stick. "Madison? What's the classification on this? I need to know what I'm walking into." There was a pause. 3.7 seconds. Madison never paused. When she spoke again, her voice dropped half an octave, and she used a phrase Garrett had only heard twice before, both times during classified national security drills at Kennedy Space Center. "Sierra November clearance. Communications blackout protocol may be enacted. Comply immediately." Sierra November meant possible threat to national security space operations. It meant somebody above NASA's pay grade was already involved. It meant whatever was outside his window 18 minutes ago had triggered response protocols that existed in 3-ring binders locked in safes, protocols that assumed space wasn't empty. Garrett was passing through the Zvezda service module when he saw Ivan Volkov looking out the portside window. Ivan was 38, Roscosmos cosmonaut, first long-duration mission, but 7 years as a defense systems engineer before that. Quiet personality, observer type, the kind of crew member who noticed everything and commented on nothing. They had shared meals, worked repair jobs together, developed the easy professional friendship that comes from trusting someone with your life in a pressurized aluminum can hurtling through vacuum. Ivan turned as Garrett approached, and without saying a word, raised one finger to his lips in a gesture that transcended language. Then he pointed at the Nikon camera tethered to his workstation. He had filmed it too. The Columbus module was empty when Garrett arrived. The wall-mounted monitor showed Madison's face from mission control, and behind her, Garrett could see the flight director's console, the screens that monitored every system on the station, every heartbeat of every crew member, every watt of power and liter of oxygen. Madison looked tired. She looked like someone who had been making phone calls to people she didn't want to call, receiving answers she didn't want to hear. When she spoke, her eyes flicked down to something off-camera every few seconds, reading. Garrett, the object you reported has been identified as debris from a classified military satellite program. All footage and recordings of this object fall under National Security Space Agreement provisions. You are required to transfer all personal recordings to Houston for security analysis immediately. This is a direct order under NSSA Article 7. Do you understand? Garrett understood several things. He understood that Madison Torres didn't lie, but she was lying now. He understood that the paper she was reading from was shaking slightly in her hands, visible as a tiny tremor at the edge of the monitor frame. He understood that Article 7 of the National Security Space Agreement had been written after the Cold War to handle scenarios where astronauts witnessed weapons testing or reconnaissance satellites, and it had never, in 43 years, been invoked for debris. He understood that somewhere between his report 18 minutes ago and this moment, someone had decided the official story, typed it up, and handed it to Madison to deliver. I understand, Garrett said, transferring files now. He transferred the file, but not before he had slipped the GoPro's micro SD card out and tucked it into the personal effects pouch in his crew quarters, the one that would return to Earth with him in 8 weeks, the one that NASA trusted astronauts to pack themselves because astronauts were trustworthy, professional, by the book. Except sometimes the book was wrong. 31 hours passed. Garrett performed his duties with the mechanical precision that astronauts are famous for, running experiments on protein crystal growth, calibrating the new atmospheric monitoring system, exercising 2 hours on the treadmill to fight bone density loss. He ate his meals, answered emails from Mason, participated in the daily planning conference with Mission Control, and acted as though nothing had changed. But everything had changed, because now he understood that the station he lived in, the agency he worked for, the careful constructed narrative of human space exploration, all of it existed within a larger context that nobody was discussing. Ivan caught his eye twice across the dining table and said nothing. Some conversations happen in silence. September 9th, 2024. 11:47 a.m. Coordinated Universal Time. Garrett was in the Unity module documenting a minor coolant leak when Harper Santos keyed the communications channel from outside the station. Harper was 29 years old, systems engineer, brilliant with a doctorate from MIT and a personality that questioned everything, which made her an excellent engineer and sometimes a challenging crew member. This was her first long-duration mission, 6 months aboard the ISS, and she was performing routine maintenance on the Canadarm2 robotic manipulator, which meant she was suited up in her EVA gear, tethered to the station's exterior, floating in hard vacuum with nothing between her and 400 kilometers of empty air to Earth's surface below. Her voice came through on open channel, which meant everyone heard it, Houston and the entire crew, and Garrett knew immediately that she had made a rookie mistake because what she said next should have gone through private channels first. ISS, this is Harper. I have visual on multiple objects, bearing 270 degrees relative to station orientation, range approximately 94 meters. 3 objects, triangular formation, identical geometry to the object from yesterday's report. They're pulsing in synchronized pattern. I'm capturing this on external camera feed 12. There was a moment of perfect silence. Radio waves traveling at light speed from ISS to Houston and back, 2.6 seconds round trip, except this silence lasted longer, 5.1 seconds. Then a voice Garrett didn't recognize came through. Male, older, carrying the gravitas of someone who had authorization to override standard Capcom procedures. ISS crew, immediate ingress. All external activities cease immediately. This is Priority Alpha Directive. Priority Alpha was a code reserved for 3 scenarios: ammonia, coolant leak with crew exposure risk, imminent collision with debris that could breach the hull, or emergency decommissioning of the station. None of those scenarios were happening. Harper's voice came back, confused. Houston, I copy Priority Alpha, but I'm in the middle of critical thermal control system repairs. The primary cooling loop has degraded seals that need immediate attention, or we risk cascade failure in 48 hours. Request clarification on the priority classification. ISS crew, Priority Alpha is confirmed. Cease all external operations. Begin immediate ingress procedure. Acknowledge immediately. The voice was not requesting. It was commanding. And underneath the command, Garrett heard something that made his chest tighten. Fear. Controlled, professional, buttoned-down military fear. But fear nonetheless. Harper acknowledged and began her ingress, the careful, choreographed process of disconnecting tethers and cycling through the Quest airlock that normally took 23 minutes when done by the book. She did it in 17. Garrett watched through the cupola module windows as the 12 external cameras, the ones that provided continuous coverage of the station's exterior and fed directly to NASA TV and public outreach channels, all rotated simultaneously. Not to track Harper's ingress, not to monitor the objects that were hanging in perfect formation 94 meters away. All 12 cameras pointed down at Earth, at cloud formations over the Pacific Ocean, at anything except what was actually there. The official explanation came through channels 3 minutes later. Camera reorientation for scheduled alignment maintenance. But the maintenance schedules were public record, posted months in advance for planning purposes, and there was no scheduled maintenance. Then the communications interference started, a hissing static that degraded voice quality and forced Houston to switch to backup channels, then tertiary channels, then finally a 47-minute window where communications went dark entirely. Solar interference affecting Q-band and S-band frequencies, Houston reported when the link was re-established. Garrett pulled up NOAA solar weather data on his laptop. Solar activity was at minimum levels. Quietest it had been in 6 months. When communications returned and Harper finally made it back inside, pressurized and desuited, her face was pale in the fluorescent lighting of the Quest module. She had been outside, alone with whatever those things were, for the entire 47 minutes of communications blackout. Garrett met her eyes and saw someone who had just learned what he had learned 31 hours earlier, that the universe they thought they understood was a simplified model, a children's version of reality, and the actual cosmos was far stranger and far less empty than anyone had prepared them for. The official report came through that evening. Incident categorized as orbital debris proximity event. Standard protocol enacted. No further action required. 3 objects that had appeared without radar warning matched impossible orbital mechanics and triggered the highest-level emergency response in NASA operations. Debris. Standard protocol. No further action required. Garrett thought about the micro SD card hidden in his personal effects pouch and wondered how many other cards, how many other pieces of evidence, how many other astronauts over how many years had hidden the same truth. September 12, 2024, 3:15 a.m. Coordinated Universal Time. The sleep shift was the closest thing to privacy the International Space Station offered, when Houston reduced monitoring to essential systems only, and the crew floated in their individual sleeping compartments, phone booth-sized spaces with sleeping bags tethered to the walls. Garrett, Ivan, and Harper met in the Tranquility Node, the quietest module on the station, where the hum of life support systems created white noise that masked whispered conversations. They had not discussed meeting. They had simply arrived, drawn by the same gravitational pull that brings people together when they realize they share a dangerous secret. Ivan spoke first, his English accented but precise, the voice of someone who had learned the language in technical manuals and mission briefings. This has happened before. Expedition 56, June 2018. Russian cosmonaut Oleg Artemyev reported similar objects during EVA maintenance. 3 objects, formation pattern, no propulsion signature. Roscosmos ordered him to sign non-disclosure agreement, but also NASA requested signature. Joint agreement between agencies. First time I have seen such cooperation between our countries on classification matter. Usually we compete, yes? We hide things from each other. But this, both agencies agreed, must be secret. He paused, and in the dim emergency lighting his face looked older than 38. When they agree on silence, it means the truth is bigger than politics. Harper had her laptop open, tethered to a handrail so it wouldn't drift. She had pulled every piece of telemetry data she could access before Houston locked down the files, technical readings that measured the station's orbital parameters down to centimeters per second. I've been running the numbers on what I observed. It's not just that these objects match our orbital velocity. That would be impressive, but theoretically possible with advanced enough propulsion. What I'm seeing in the data is predictive matching. The ISS makes constant micro-adjustments to maintain orbital altitude. We fire thrusters every 2 to 3 weeks to compensate for atmospheric drag. Small burns, 0.3 meters per second delta V, scheduled but with some variability depending on solar activity and atmospheric density. On September 9th, we had a scheduled adjustment at 11:52 a.m. UTC. Standard procedure. Deke? She rotated the laptop so Garrett and Ivan could see the data streams, columns of numbers that tracked thruster activation and position changes. The objects adjusted their position at 11:51 and 19.2 seconds. That's 0.8 seconds before our propulsion system activated. They knew what we were about to do before we did it. Garrett felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear exactly, but the recognition that came when you understood a problem was bigger than your capacity to solve it. Predictive algorithms. They could be monitoring our systems, detecting the pre-fire sequences in our thruster computers. I checked that. Harper's fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up another data set. Pre-fire sequence doesn't begin until 0.4 seconds before ignition. The objects moved 0.8 seconds before. They anticipated our maneuver before our own systems registered it was happening. That's not monitoring. That's something else. The three of them floated in silence, and Garrett thought about the implications. Technology that could predict actions before they occurred. Objects that appeared without warning on tracking systems that monitored 27,000 pieces of debris, with radar accurate to 10 centimeters. Geometry that bent light in ways that made his trained pilot's eyes hurt. And somewhere on Earth, in offices with security clearances above top secret, people who had known about this for at least 6 years, and possibly much longer, who had decided that humanity was not ready to know that we were being observed. He made his decision. I have the footage. Full 4 minutes and 47 seconds. I'm going to send it to someone who can analyze it properly. Dr. Cassidy Flynn, astrophysicist at University of Arizona. She runs the SETI observational program there. More importantly, she's a friend. I trust her scientific integrity, and I trust her to handle this correctly. He didn't mention that Cassidy had a reputation for publishing controversial findings, for standing behind data even when it contradicted establishment consensus. That was exactly why she was the right person. Astronauts received 2 hours per week of personal internet access through the station's Ku-band antenna system, private time for emails and video calls with family. Garrett used his allotted time that afternoon, composing an encrypted email through his personal account, attaching the video file with technical notes on timestamp, location, and observational parameters. The encryption was standard commercial grade, the kind of thing people used for sensitive business documents. Not military grade, not NSA proof. He sent it at 14:37 UTC and watched the progress bar fill as the file uploaded through the antenna to the relay satellite to the ground station to the internet backbone to Cassidy's university server. 14 minutes later, his personal comm unit chimed. Madison's voice, but not on the official NASA channel. On his private line, the one reserved for family emergencies. Garrett, listen to me. As your friend, not your flight director. Delete everything. Forget this. They are already on their way to bring you home early. Medical rotation. You leave in 9 days. Madison, what's happening? Her voice cracked, just slightly, the way metal cracks under stress before it fails completely. Something that's been happening for a long time. And we're not in control of when it's disclosed. That decision was made by... She stopped. The pause stretched 5 seconds. 6. 7. When she spoke again, it was barely a whisper. Others. I've said too much. Take care of your son, Garrett. The line went dead. Garrett floated in the silence of the Tranquility Node, 254 miles above a planet that suddenly felt very small, very fragile, and very much under observation by something that understood the future better than he understood the present. September 21st, 2024. Garrett Chen returned to Earth aboard a SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule under what NASA officially termed routine medical rotation. His physical examination at Johnson Space Center showed cardiovascular function within normal parameters, bone density loss consistent with expected rates for 8 weeks in microgravity, and no anomalies that would justify early return. The medical officer who signed the clearance form looked at Garrett for a long moment before handing him the paperwork, and in that look Garrett saw everything that couldn't be said. We both know this is theater. We both know you saw something. We both know silence is the price of continued employment. Garrett signed the non-disclosure agreement the same afternoon, 14 pages of legal language that essentially stated he would never discuss the events of September 8th through 12th under penalty of federal prosecution. Ivan and Harper signed identical documents via encrypted communications from the ISS, but Dr. Cassidy Flynn had already published her preliminary analysis. 6 hours after receiving Garrett's email, she uploaded a technical paper to archive.org, the open-access scientific repository used by researchers worldwide to share findings before formal peer review. The paper was titled Anomalous Orbital Objects Exhibiting Non-Newtonian Propulsion Characteristics, Analysis of ISS Observational Data. See, it included frame-by-frame breakdown of the footage, spectroscopic analysis of the infrared pulses, and calculations demonstrating that matching ISS orbital velocity without visible propulsion violated every known principle of rocket engineering. The paper existed on archive's servers for exactly 6 hours and 17 minutes before it was removed at the request of the Department of Defense under national security provisions. But in those 6 hours, 47 different servers worldwide had mirrored the document. When you try to delete information from the internet, you don't make it disappear. You make it interesting. Within 48 hours, the footage was classified under Title 50 of the United States Code, the same legal framework used for nuclear weapons programs and signals intelligence operations. News outlets that had downloaded Cassidy's paper received polite but firm requests from DoD legal counsel to refrain from publication pending national security review. Most complied. Some did not. The story leaked in fragments, pieces of a puzzle that no single source could complete, but that collectively formed a picture of something unprecedented. Multiple credible witnesses, scientific analysis from a respected astrophysicist, and institutional response that was proportional only if the threat was real. In December 2024, NASA held a press conference to announce the formation of an independent study team focused on what they termed unidentified anomalous phenomena in near-Earth orbital environment. It was the first time in the agency's 66-year history that NASA officially acknowledged UAPs as a legitimate area of scientific investigation. 3 weeks later, Roscosmos issued a similar statement, announcing cooperation with international partners on unexplained observational phenomena in low Earth orbit. The coordination was unprecedented. American and Russian space agencies agreeing on anything was rare. Agreeing on what to investigate and when to announce it suggested planning, consultation, unified strategy. It suggested that whatever was being observed didn't respect national boundaries because it existed above all boundaries, in the orbital realm where human jurisdiction dissolves into vacuum. In February 2025, Harper Santos gave a carefully worded interview to Scientific American, her first public statement since returning to Earth. She chose her words with the precision of someone who had lawyers reviewing every sentence. What we observed challenges our current understanding of propulsion physics. But more significantly, it challenges our assumption that we control the timeline of disclosure regarding our presence in space. Perhaps that timeline is not ours to control. Perhaps it never was. The interview was published, discussed, analyzed. Harper declined all follow-up requests. The package arrived at Garrett's home in Houston on March 3, 2025. No return address. No postmark that indicated origin. Inside the unmarked envelope was a solid-state drive, consumer-grade, the kind you could buy at any electronics store. Garrett connected it to his laptop with hands that had piloted aircraft at twice the speed of sound, that had operated robotic arms in vacuum, that had never trembled before. The drive contained a single file, 11 minutes and 34 seconds of video footage, timestamp encoded as June 27, 2009, camera metadata identifying it as ISS External Camera Feed 7. Mission Designation Expedition 20. 16 years ago. Garrett watched an object identical to what he had filmed. Same geometry, same light-bending distortion field, same infrared pulse pattern, holding position 193 meters from the station. Same impossible physics, same patient observation. They had been watching for at least 16 years, possibly longer, and they were getting closer. Garrett thought about the Fermi paradox, the question that had haunted humanity since we first understood the statistical likelihood of other civilizations. Where is everybody? The universe is 13.8 billion years old. Our galaxy contains 400 billion stars. The math suggests we should be swimming in radio signals surrounded by evidence of intelligence. Instead, silence. Or what we interpreted as silence. Perhaps the question was never, where are they? But, when will they choose to be seen? And if they were choosing now, after decades or centuries of patient observation, what did that mean? What had changed? What threshold had humanity crossed that made us worth revealing themselves to? He looked at the framed photo on his desk. Mason, age 12, wearing a NASA t-shirt, holding a model of the International Space Station that Garrett had given him before launch. A child who dreamed of stars, who asked questions about nebulae and exoplanets, who wanted to understand the cosmos with the pure curiosity that makes childhood magical. What do you tell the next generation when you discover the universe is not empty? Do you tell them to be afraid? Or do you teach them wonder? Garrett chose wonder. Because whatever was out there, whatever had been observing humanity's tentative steps into orbital space, had been patient. Patience implies restraint. Restraint implies choice. Choice implies intelligence. And intelligence that chooses to watch rather than intervene, that waits for decades, that matches our velocity without revealing its methods, that intelligence is not acting randomly. It has intent, purpose, a timeline that operates on scales we're only beginning to understand. We are not alone. We have never been alone. And perhaps the real question is not whether we're ready to know that truth, but whether we're ready to accept that readiness itself might not be our decision to make. The objects are still up there, still watching, still waiting. And every 90 minutes, the International Space Station passes overhead, carrying 6 human beings who look out their windows at a universe that is infinitely larger, infinitely stranger, and infinitely less empty than we ever imagined.